The European Union wants to scale back risks in dealing with China, both diplomatically and economically. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says Beijing's approach to Russia's war in Ukraine will be central to shaping future ties, but said Europe is not looking to decouple from China.
How China meets international obligation regarding human rights will be another test for how and how much we can cooperate with China. Just as China has been ramping up its military posture, it has also ramped up its policies of disinformation and economic and trade coercion. This is a deliberate policy targeting other countries to ensure they comply and conform.
Ms. von der Leyen observed that China is becoming more repressive at home and more assertive abroad. And so the EU needs to rebalance its relationship and reduce its reliance on China. The EU president said the Communist Party has a clear goal to make systemic changes to the world order, with China at the centre. Her remarks come a week before she heads to Beijing with French President Emmanuel Macron for talks. The pair are expected to meet with President Xi Jinping. Well, this Ross Cullen joins us live from Paris. Now, Ross, strong remarks from the European Commission President. Of course, we've seen shifts. In March 2019, the bloc started referring to China for the first time as a strategic rival. Is it shifting its approach again to dealing with China?
Yeah, it was a strong speech by Ursula von der Leyen this morning, the European Commission President in Brussels, clearly, publicly laying out the ambition for the current and future relationship that the European Union has with China ahead of April the 4th, when she and French President Emmanuel Macron here from France will be travelling together to China for that trip. Certainly, throughout her speech, she was very strong when it comes to the condemnation of things that she believes the European Union does not agree with in terms of human rights violations inside China, in terms of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which she described as atrocious and illegal, and said that the friendship between Moscow and Beijing speaks 1,000 words after President Xi's recent trip to visit President Putin in Moscow, saying that if China wants to play a constructive role in any future version of peace, for that vision, how it looks in Ukraine, it has to be following and safeguarding the United Nations Charter, which also includes supporting territorial integrity and sovereignty of nations, saying that China has a responsibility now as the second biggest country in the world in terms of the economic size of China, in terms of its permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council, in terms of its overall growing influence on the world stage. China has a responsibility, Ursula von der Leyen said, to safeguard the international order, which, as you mentioned in the intro, China is suggesting that it wants to try to enact this systemic change of the international order, placing China at the centre of that. Let's listen in now to a little bit more of what Ursula von der Leyen had to say.
It is clear that our relations have become more distant and more difficult in the last few years. We've seen a very deliberate hardening of China's overall strategic posture for some time. And it has now been matched by a ratcheting up of increasingly assertive actions.
Now, Wei Su and Dawn, there was no beating around the bush. You heard there in that little soundbite from the European Commission President the distance and difficulty that she now believes characterises the relationship between the European Union and China.
And Ross, given that she's headed to Beijing next week, given these not beating about the bush comments, can we expect anything positive to come out of these talks with President Xi Jinping?
Well, Ursula von der Leyen said that she would not be shying away from raising issues of concern, for example, over what she classed as the, quote, grave human rights violations of great concern that the European Union says it's witnessing in Xinjiang province in the far west of China. They wouldn't be shying away from raising those. But on a slightly more positive note, the European Commission President did say that there are, quote, islands of opportunity where there might be more chance for alignment between Beijing and Brussels. One of those is on the climate emergency, dealing with the climate crisis, dealing with the protection needed to support biodiversity, reduce the use of plastics, increase the use of renewable energy, areas where she, in her speech, hailed the work that has been done on the international stage by China in that green and environmental arena so far. So that's certainly one area of alignment where the European Union and France will be looking to build on that work. But there certainly will be tough conversations, particularly about Ukraine. We know that in the past, the French president has said that he would be hoping Xi Jinping could use his influence with Vladimir Putin to put pressure on Moscow to end its war in Ukraine.
And thank you. That was Ross Cullen reporting from Paris.